How to save a dying rose bush. For avid fans and growers of roses, there is nothing more disheartening than having a rose bush die on you. However, before uprooting the little guy and throwing him away, there are steps you can take to possibly revive your rose bush to its former glory. Part 1: Clearing the area around your rose bush. (1) Clear up the area around your rose bush. The first thing you should do is to clear up the area around your rose bush. Weeds growing around your rose bush may be sucking up all the nutrients in the soil. Fallen leaves and flowers should be picked up by hand instead of raked. Raking disrupts the soil and may expose weed seeds to sunlight, therefore urging them to sprout. Always remove any dead flowers and fallen leaves from the ground around your rose bush. These may look harmless, but if they get wet and do not dry properly, mold will fester and may infect your rose bush. 2. Inspect your rose for dead flowers and remove them. Dead flowers and leaves that are still attached to the rose bush can either be plucked off or pruned using shears as closest to the cane as possible. 3. Remove weeds around your rose bush. Weeds around your rose bush should also be removed. Make sure you have a firm grasp of the weed, as close to the roots as possible, and give it a good tug. Roots should be removed or else they will sprout again in as little as a matter of days. Part 2: Pruning your rose bush. (1) Prune your rose bush. You should consider pruning your rose bush as soon as the weather starts to warm up, usually right after the last frost, so that your rose bush is not at risk of being damaged by another frost or sudden rise in temperature. You should also prune your rose bush when the buds start to swell. Check your rose bush for signs of new leaf growth and if the buds are starting to grow red in color. Sometimes pruning depends on the type of rose you have. There are some roses that require pruning while dormant, whilst other roses require pruning after they bloom. A rose bush should be pruned while it's dormant if you notice that it produces new growth in the spring and the blooms come from this new growth. However, if the blooms come from the old canes, then it should be pruned after it blooms instead. 2. Use proper pruning shears and make sure that they are sharp. You do not want to cause more harm to the canes by using blunt shears. Also try to avoid cutting at a straight line. Instead, try cutting at an angle because it will help the cane heal quicker. Don't hesitate to cut off the all dead and diseased looking canes in your rose bush before it starts infecting the healthy ones. Also prune old canes to allow new growth. 3. Know where to prune your rose. Prune the center of the bush to allow maximum air circulation to prevent fungi growth due to accumulating moisture. This also allows for better exposure to the sun. Prune the growth on main canes that don't grow to a reasonable thickness. If the growth is no thicker than a pencil, then it should be pruned. Prune old and dead canes down to where it meets fresh ones. You can tell that a cane is dead or diseased if it has dead leaves and is woody, characterized by a dried and brown appearance. 4. Prune an overgrown rose bush. You can tell if a bush is overgrown if it looks like a huge shrub of intertwined canes, basically a tangled mess. Most overgrown bushes will have dead canes and unproductive canes. Don't hesitate to prune as many canes as needed. Part 3: Fertilizing your rose bush. One, add nutrients to your soil. To get your rose bush back to its healthy state, make sure to provide adequate nutrients to your soil. Water the soil thoroughly before spreading the ingredients evenly around the bush up to the outer perimeter. Afterward, water again to make a nutrient-rich soil feed. 1 cup bone meal or superphosphate, 1 cup cottonseed meal, cup blood meal, fish meal, Epsom salt, magnesium sulfate. 2. Know that you can fertilize before spring arrives if need be. Most people fertilize their rose bush at the start of spring. However, if you notice new growth in your rose bush, you can start giving it fertilizer even if it's a bit early. Your rose bush will require more nutrition when it is growing and budding. During the peak growing season, fertilize your rose bush every 4-6 weeks. 3. Make sure to water your rose bush before and after giving it fertilizer. Watering it before applying fertilizer prevents the fertilizer from burning your plant. 4. Add fertilizer directly to the base of the plant. If the fertilizer is allowed to come into contact with your plant's leaves, the fertilizer will burn the leaves and cause them to wilt. Because of this, make sure that you keep the fertilizer at the base of the plant. Part 4: Mulching and watering your rose bush. One, cover the area around your rose bush with at least 1 inch or 2 of mulch. This will allow the soil to retain more moisture for the roots and discourage weed growth, which will compete with your rose bush for nutrients and moisture. If the area around your rose bush has a good drainage, you can apply 2 4-inch, 5, 1/10, 2 cm layer of mulch. If the drainage is poor, a thinner layer should be used. This is to make sure that your rose bush does not drown in too much water. 2. Try a newspaper mulch if you have weed problems. The newspaper or cardboard mulching technique is highly recommended for those with extreme weed problems. This is done by placing a layer of newspaper or cardboard the whole area of soil and adding a top layer of mulch. This is to prevent any weed seeds from being exposed to the sun as to avoid allowing them to sprout. 3. Make sure to water your rose bush adequately. During the summer, or if you live somewhere where the temperature reaches 90 degrees, it is recommended that you water your rose bush for 15 minutes straight, daily. During the winter, you can just water your rose bush every other day.
Tips.
These steps will hopefully allow your rose bush another chance to regain its health by getting rid of the cause of its decline in health, weed, dead and diseased canes, and giving it proper care and sustenance, mulch, fertilizer, water,